Hello everyone, my name is Edward Carter III, and for my modeling complex system projects this semester is modeling effects of sex education intervention on HIV infection population. So my motivation for this particular project, and just give a little background, I love history, and one thing I do when it comes to history is watch a lot of documentaries. And I was watching a documentary about the 1980s, and one big thing about the 80s was the HIV virus. The HIV virus plagued the world from around 1981 when it was discovered and identified. HIV and AIDS. And in that time frame, sexual education has been deployed uh, over the decades to slow the spread of the virus. Because if you don't know, there was a lot of ignorance back then about the virus. It was always looked at as a virus, a disease that you can only get if you are engaging in homosexual sex or anything like that. But that was simply not the case. It was much more convoluted than that. And basically, sexual education, it just clearly leads to less people contracting diseases, of course, because the more knowledgeable you are about something, especially a disease such as this, then the more likely you are to be smart about it and just simply move forward and do all that you can to take the necessary precautions to not contract the disease. And then this figure from on the right, this is from the CDC. This is a figure of the morbidity and mortality weekly report that they have in regards to HIV. So the projected goals of this project are simply to model how much sexual education intervention really can have an effect on the amount of HIV infections. Of course, I want to conclude on how sexual education can change the outcome on a population in in effect, and also, of course, analyze the results from the simulation of sexual education on HIV infections. So this is a more related work, just like the figure that I showed earlier on the second slide. These are uh, these are works from the CDC as well, also in conjunction with the Journal of Intelligent Information Systems, as well as BMC Public Health. The method I decided to use was to use the SEIR model. I feel like it would be great to use this model to gear it towards sexual education intervention in order to analyze and how it would affect the spread of the disease itself. I feel like incorporating the influence of sex education into this model, we can actually see how different levels of the intervention can actually contribute to containment and control of the disease spread within the population. So my assumptions for this project to make it to where this works for the SEIR model is that the population is closed, meaning no one's getting in or out, no immigration, no immigration, no one's going in and out of this enclosed population. The sex education intervention, whether that be a class, a pamphlet, different informational visual aids, different things like that, they're all going to be distributed to everyone at the same time, at the same rate. Everyone's going to get the same amount of fair education here. Um, then the exposed and infected individuals are initially distributed uniformly across the population as well. So the initial conditions of my compartments are here as followed. As a whole, we're using 100,000 people, and the susceptible individuals are essentially everyone besides the exposed, which is at 100. So the susceptible is 99,900, and the infected individuals are again, mind you, these are initial conditions, so they are at 0, as well as the recover and death individuals. It could be recover, removed, but I just call it death because that would be the most logical way to be removed from this simulation. So the parameters, the transmission rate is at zero point 0.5. Keep in mind, and the rate of the exposed individuals are are 1/5 at a 5-day incubation period. Uh, like I said before, the total population is 100,000, and this is over a period of 200 days. This is over a period of 200 days, and like I said, the recovery, removal slash death rate would be 1/10 with a 10-day infection period, a 10-day infectious period, of course. Now, the main part of this project, of course, is the sex education part of this, the sex education piece, which is at 0.7. That is the main parameter for this entire project, and we're going to see how it can actually affect the SEIMR model when it comes to sexual education. Like I said, here is a simple breakdown of our SEIR model with the transmission rate, again, like I said, 0.5. Uh, the recovery and remove rate being 1/10, and the sex education intervention rate being 0.7, as I mentioned before. Just to touch on the model, just to give it a little bit more context, for anyone watching that doesn't know, this is the chance for the HIV spreading when a healthy person and an infection person have contact. So like I said before, there are 99,900 susceptible people out there. We have to remember that. And 100 already exposed people. So if you keep that in mind, you can kind of start to see how the model starts to take shape with our given parameters. But of course, the sex education intervention rate being at 0.7, it just simply shows how education can lower the population of 100,000 people's chances of spreading the HIV virus. And also, again, for people that don't know, a higher number here for sex education intervention, the higher that is, the better sex education will be to stop HIV and lower it. So here's the simulation. This was generated from MATLAB using the above parameters that I mentioned before, the SEIR model with sex education intervention. You actually can notice that around the 60 to 65 day period is when you start to see the major shift. The major shift from susceptible all the way to the infected and even the exposed. The sexual education intervention, essentially, in effect, you can see that it is a success in this scenario. You would think, though, my initial thoughts, and also I would beg to go as far as anyone else's are like already preconceived notions, is that, sexual education should already the everything should be decreased even earlier than a 60-65 day period. Well, no. Based off this model, that's not simply the case. It wouldn't be gone in 10 days or 20 days or even 30 days. We see that we really get to see true change around the 55 to 65 day mark. And as far as the discussion session goes, like I said, you can obviously see the significant change around the 60 to 65 day mark. The results demonstrate that sex education intervention takes some time to manifest its effect on the population itself. You can see that the simulation results can help improve sex education programs, definitely give it the backing that it needs to spread it to more schools, more communities in the country and then in the world. You can see as sex education intervention lowers the number of infections over time, the overall health of the population, of course, would improve, and just essentially reducing the burden of HIV and just reducing the mortality rate all throughout the whole population of 100,000 people. And it makes me think about how in the 1980s, in the 1990s, when we just think about the United States for a minute, there was a lot of ignorance. Like I said, homosexual sex was the given culprit by a lot of the media at the time. Scientists did not really know what was the main culprit of it, because it involves the taking out of your white blood cells, essentially event excuse me essentially making your entire immune system unworkable, obsolete, whatever word that you want to use. And scientists couldn't figure out what that was. So then there was just a lot of hate towards the HIV virus and the gay community because of this virus itself. So then you would notice that there was a large uptick from the 80s, but mostly in the 1990s, all the way through the mid 1990s, because of the ignorance. So you see the ignorance is a direct byproduct. So you see that the uptick in the 90s is a direct byproduct of the ignorance from the 1980s. It wasn't until around the 2000s where you actually get to see sexual education, and actually the mid 90s, a lot of people were dying, a lot of people were getting it more and more. The world was in a frenzy, so you saw a lot of sexual education starting to come into frame, and you saw a lot of HIV spread decrease over the years in the United States, and now we have it to where it's almost nowhere near where it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that's what I wanted to simulate here in this presentation in my project. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you.